Well, I was glad to have you on my program. This is a, pretty important subject to me. I know that there's a lot of religions out there, and, well, I think you and me both know, after a little bit of research, that can't all of them be the one true path to God. They probably all have a little bit of the way. You just have to figure out which is and which is not. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I think people need to know that, because I think they can get a more rounded life with their walk with God if they try to look around in more than just one religion, in other words.
Yeah, and I think in the end, it's going to boil down to an individual choice. I can't see everybody coming into full agreement on which religion or which God is right. So people have to have the freedom to make their own choices. And I myself, I'm all for that. I'm not a religious person myself. Although I do believe in God, I don't believe that man has properly defined God. So I don't follow any particular religion.
I don't either.
Yeah. Okay. So, like I was brought up in the Islamic faith, and I did 5 prayers a day and the whole thing coming up as a youth. But as I got older and began to think more inquisitively and maturely, I became dissatisfied with that and Christianity, Judaism. Well, every religion that I investigated, none of them satisfied me. Now with my books, the main focus of my books, I deal with the interpretation of biblical mythology, because the Bible, the Quran, and the Torah, they're not actually historical books, as I see it and as many others see it, but they're books of mythology. And so when one investigates my books, they will see that a lot of references to the Bible. But what I say in reference to the Bible in my books, it applies to the Quran, and it applies to the Torah, the Tanakh, and all of the monotheistic books, and that's one thing I want people to understand, because some people, when they hear my name, the Muslim name, they think it's a Muslim making an attack on Christianity, which is not the case. I don't believe in Christianity, and I don't believe in Islam either. I'm a free thinker, and although we use the Bible as our tool for investigation, what I say in my books, it applies to monotheism in total.
Okay, I'm glad you clarified that, because it'll help people understand you better.
And, for instance, when we look at the ancient mythology of the Greeks and Romans, we find their gods by the names of Jupiter, Mars, Vulcan, Apollo, Venus, and other such associated names. It's clear that there's an astronomical connection with the gods that these people worship in their mythology. And the point that I make in my books is that the same applies today with monotheism and other various religions too, but we're focused on monotheism, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, that these gods of our faith, they have astronomical counterparts. And what my books do, they deal with explaining and proving these counterparts. Now, one way to exemplify that, take the Garden of Eden saga in the Bible. Now, we know with that tale, we have a situation of Adam and Eve. Supposedly, the first human pair, and we find them in a garden of delights with a talking snake, with a tree that has knowledge, with another tree of life. Now, this particular tale, I think most rational people will agree, excuse me, I have to take a sip of tea there. I think most rational people will agree that the tale cannot be literally true, although there are fundamentalist Christians and Muslims who say it has to be true. But I think most of us who think rationally about that scenario depicted in the Bible know that it just cannot be true. And now either it's just total nonsense for a rational thinking person, or it must be symbolic of something. And what we do with astro-mythology, with scenarios like that depicted in the Bible of Adam and Eve, we search the ages and the eras of the heavens, and we try to find some correlations so that we can find the cosmic or astronomical counterparts to this talking serpent, to this tree of life, to the tree of knowledge and good and evil, and to Adam and Eve. And by finding these correlations, then we're able to break the symbol, decode the symbol, and make some type of rational sense out of that story. And I'm gonna give an overview of the definitions which I have found in my research on this subject. In searching for correlations to the event described, when we go back about 8,000 or 9,000 years to the astrological age of Gemini, which that astrological age, it came on about 6,606 BC, if my memory is correct. I have a chart of all these ages, astrological ages, in my books, of course. But an astrological age, of course, that is referring to which particular zodiac constellation is occupying the vernal equinox in any given era. And the astrological ages, they go from, they measure 2,160 years. That means that a particular zodiac sign is occupying the vernal equinox for that period of time. And 6,606 BC, we find Gemini coming to the collar of the vernal equinox. Now, also at that time, in 6,606 BC, some other coordinates that are used extensively in astro-mythology or astrotheology are the circumpolar stars. The circumpolar stars, the stars which and constellations which revolve around the polar hub, the celestial polar hub. These are non-setting stars. At the same time that Gemini was coming into play at the vernal equinox, the constellation of Draconis was coming into play at the amongst the circumpolar stars. And the circumpolar stars, you got about 6, 7, 8, 9 constellations, whatever, that are constantly visible because of their positions at the north celestial pole. Now, what we need to do in order to make some sense out of the Adam and Eve scenario given in the Bible is to make some correlations between the positions of the stars during the era of Gemini, because, like I said, we have found that is the era that matches this story in the Bible, and the various components of the Garden of Eden saga. And I'll do that pretty quickly as an overview, and striking details are in my book, as I said before. But now, okay, we have the talking snake of Genesis. Now, this talking snake, it can be correlated to the constellation of Draconis, the dragon constellation. That constellation is known as the dragon, is known as the serpent, is known as a constellation in the mythology I'm talking about, is known as a rather demonic constellation. And that constellation, we can prove and have proved, has correlations to the talking snake in the Genesis of the Bible. Now, we notice that the Bible tells us that this serpent in Genesis, it was wrapped around the tree and communicated with Eve and Adam from that position. Now, two other major components of the circumpolar era, by which it is demarcated, are the celestial pole and the pole of the ecliptic. The celestial pole, of course, is an extension of the earth pole into the heavens. And the pole of the ecliptic being the pathway of the sun, apparently around the earth, and its pole, of course, is 90 degrees from the ecliptic. So the pole of the ecliptic and the celestial pole are about 23.5 degrees apart. But the point is, that helps bring great clarity to this myth in the Bible, is that the constellation Draconis is a winding, twisting constellation. And when you look at the charts that shows this constellation in the sky, it actually wraps around the pole of the ecliptic. If we substitute the term pole for tree, and we got to think in terms of how the ancients thought thousands of years ago when they viewed these heavenly apparitions, and using descriptions for them that were germane to their environment, we can see the pole of the ecliptic as actually a tree, and Draconis wrapped around the tree, and this gives meaning to the serpent within Genesis wrapped around the tree. The constellation of Draconis wrapped around the pole of the ecliptic in the heavens. Now, the Bible also says that there was a tree of life, that there's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. Now, the other tree, of course, is the celestial pole of the earth. Now, the celestial pole, as we mentioned earlier in the conversation, the stars that revolve around the celestial pole, they never set. They're there constantly. We know that our other stars, they come and go. We don't look at the same stars overhead from month to month, except for the circumpolar stars. They never set. They are there night after night, season after season. And so, although in this time we say they never set, we can see the ancients saying, believing that there were spirits in the heavens and so forth, that those stars never die. They live constantly. They live from season to season, from year to year. They're always seen, the circumpolar stars. So we can see, as envisioning how they saw these things, with the hub that these stars and constellation revolved around, these ever-living stars that never died, this hub was viewed in their picturesque language as a tree of life, which the constellation and stars that never died revolved around. This was a source of that life in their picturesque language. So here we can see, in a brief overview, that a story within the Bible and the Quran and so forth that absolutely has to be viewed as an absolute fairy tale. When we look for correlations on the basis of astrotheology, we can find some matches. This, with a little more knowledge, can help us make sense of the whole saga, the whole story that is given on through the expelling of Adam and Eve from the garden, and et cetera, we can make sense of this whole scenario by bringing forth correlations from the cosmic arena. So, in a nutshell, I'm trying to give an overview of the type of material that my books delve into.
Right.